My name is Ava, and if you had met me before that Thanksgiving, you probably would have described me as easy to be around. That's what people usually said. I never argued, never raised my voice, and almost always agreed, even when I didn't want to. At the time, I thought that made me a good person. Looking back now, I realize it mostly made me invisible. That year, I traveled to my parents' house in Europe for Thanksgiving, something we didn't always celebrate in a big way, but my mother liked the idea of bringing everyone together. The house itself was large and old, with tall windows that let in soft gray light and a long wooden dining table that could seat all of us comfortably. It always smelled like roasted food and polished floors, a mix that felt both warm and a little overwhelming. My mother, Eleanor, had been preparing for days, making sure everything looked perfect. My father, George, moved around quietly, setting plates and glasses in his usual careful way. My brother Daniel arrived later than everyone else, as usual, bringing his loud energy with him. He walked in like the whole room belonged to him, laughing before he even said hello. His wife, Clara, followed close behind, dressed perfectly and smiling in a way that never quite reached her eyes. They brought wine and stories and filled the space quickly, while I stood near the kitchen doorway, watching and smiling when expected. Dinner started peacefully enough. Plates were passed around, glasses were filled, and for a while, it felt like any other family gathering. I kept my head down, focusing on my food, answering questions politely when they came my way. I had learned over the years that staying quiet kept things smooth. It kept people happy. Then Daniel turned his attention to me. "You're still the same, Sophia," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Always so quiet. Don't you ever get tired of it?" I forced a small laugh, unsure of what to say. "I'm fine," I replied softly. Clara tilted her head, studying me like I was something curious. "It's actually kind of impressive," she said. "You just go along with everything. No complaints, no opinions." "I don't think I could do that." "It's because she doesn't stand up for herself," Daniel added quickly. "Honestly, she lets people walk all over her." There was a pause, and then Clara laughed lightly. "She's like a doormat." The word hit me harder than I expected. Doormat. I looked down at my plate, hoping someone would change the subject, but no one did. My mother just sighed softly, as if she had been thinking the same thing all along. "You do need to be stronger, Sophia," she said. "The world isn't kind to people who don't speak up." Even my father nodded in agreement, his expression calm but firm. "People respect those who respect themselves," he said. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, quietly, exactly as they expected me to be. But inside, something didn't feel the same anymore. For the first time, their words didn't just hurt, they made me question everything I had accepted about myself. 3 weeks after that dinner, I was back in my apartment in America, surrounded by silence that felt both comforting and unfamiliar. My place was small compared to my parents' house in Europe, but it was enough for me. A simple living room, a narrow kitchen, and a bedroom with a single window that let in soft morning light. There were no loud voices there, no sudden laughter that felt like it was aimed at me, no quiet judgments hiding behind polite words. For the first time in a long while, I could hear my own thoughts clearly. At first, I tried to slip back into my normal routine as if nothing had changed. I went to work, greeted my coworkers with the same polite smile, and kept my head down like always. I answered emails quickly, took on extra tasks without complaint, and apologized even when things weren't my fault. On the outside, I was still the same Sophia everyone knew. But inside, something was different. That one word, doormat, kept coming back to me. It showed up in quiet moments, like when I was making coffee or sitting alone at night. It wasn't just what they said, it was how easily they said it, how natural it felt to them. That's what stayed with me. It made me wonder how long they had all been thinking it. And the more I thought about it, the more memories started to surface. All the times I had lent Daniel money without asking for it back. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, until it quietly added up to thousands. He always had a reason, always a promise that he'd repay me soon. I never pushed him. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Then there were the times Clara made little comments about me at gatherings, always with a smile, always just light enough to pass as a joke. I would laugh along, even when it stung. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. Even my parents, especially my mother, had a way of asking for things that didn't feel like requests. They felt like expectations. And I always met them. because saying no never felt like an option. One evening, I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop open, looking over my finances. It was something I did regularly, but this time, it felt more personal. I had worked hard for everything I had. I had built my savings slowly, carefully. Nearly $45,000 sat in my account, untouched except for necessary expenses. My credit score was excellent, something I had protected for years by being responsible and cautious. For the first time, I didn't just feel proud of it. I felt protective. That was new. A few days later, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. I glanced at the screen and saw my mother's name, Eleanor. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, but old habits are hard to break. I answered. "Sophia," she said, her voice softer than usual, almost careful. "How are you, dear?" "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was a brief pause, the kind that always meant something was coming. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." I sat down slowly, already feeling a familiar tension in my chest. "Okay. It's about your brother," she continued. "Daniel has started a business. It's a very good opportunity, really promising. He's been working on it for months now." I didn't say anything, letting her continue. "He's planning to import furniture between Europe and America," she explained. "High-quality pieces. There's a strong market for it, and he's already found suppliers." That sounded like Daniel. Big ideas, big plans. "That's good," I said quietly. "Yes, it is," she replied quickly. "But there's just one small issue. The bank won't approve his loan on its own. They say his credit history isn't strong enough." I closed my eyes for a second, already knowing where this was going. "But yours is," she added. "Sophia, you've always been responsible. Careful. You have perfect credit. If you co-sign the loan, they'll approve it immediately." There it was. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the edge of the table. "How much is the loan?" I asked. There was a slight hesitation before she answered. "Around $120,000. The number settled heavily in the air. "That's a lot," I said. "It's an investment," she corrected gently. "This could change his life. He just needs a little support to get started." Support. I thought about all the support I had already given over the years, the money I never saw again, the patience that was never acknowledged. "Here's your brother," she continued, her voice taking on a more familiar tone now. "Family helps each other. You know that." I did know that. Or at least, I thought I did. I stood up and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. Cars passed by, people walked without knowing anything about the conversation I was having. The world felt distant for a moment. "Sophia," my mother prompted. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Then you understand why this is important," she went on. "He just needs you to sign with him. That's all. You won't even have to pay anything unless something goes wrong, and nothing will go wrong. Daniel believes in this." Daniel believed in a lot of things. I stayed silent, and in that silence, something inside me became very clear. For years, I had said yes before even thinking. I had agreed out of habit, out of fear of disappointing them. But now, for the first time, I was thinking first. And what I felt wasn't guilt. It was hesitation. And underneath that, something stronger. "No," I said quietly. There was a long pause on the other end. "I'm sorry," my mother asked, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I can't co-sign the loan." Her voice changed immediately. "Sophia, don't be ridiculous. This is your brother. He needs you." "I understand that," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "But this is a big risk. If something goes wrong, I'm responsible for all of it." "Nothing will go wrong," she insisted. "You're overthinking this." Maybe I was. But maybe, for once, I wasn't. I thought back to that dinner table, to the laughter, to the word that had followed me for weeks. Doormat. And before I could stop myself, the words came out. "Sorry," I said, my voice steady now. "Doormats don't sign legal documents." The silence that followed was heavier than anything she had said before. "Sophia," she began, but I didn't let her finish. "I have to go," I said, and before she could respond, I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone, my heart racing. My hands were shaking, but deep down, beneath the fear and the doubt, there was something else growing quietly. Relief. The silence after that phone call didn't last long. At first, there was nothing, no messages, no calls, no reactions. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had accepted my answer. That they understood. I should have known better. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Daniel and 2 messages from Clara. My chest tightened as I stared at my phone. I didn't open the messages right away. Instead, I got ready for work, moving slowly, as if delaying it would somehow soften whatever waited for me. It didn't. By the time I sat down with my coffee, I finally opened Clara's messages. Sophia, I don't know what you're thinking, but this isn't like you. You're being really selfish right now. Daniel is under a lot of pressure. Selfish. I read the word twice, letting it settle in. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. I had spent most of my life making sure no one could ever call me that. And yet, here it was, used so easily. Daniel called again while I was still staring at the screen. This time, I answered. What's wrong with you? He said immediately, skipping any kind of greeting. His voice was sharp, frustrated. Mom told me what you said. You seriously refused. I didn't refuse, I replied quietly. I just said I can't co-sign the loan. That's the same thing, he snapped. Do you even realize what this means? This is my business, Sophia. My future. I understand that, I said, trying to stay calm. But it's a big responsibility. I can't take that on. There was a short, bitter laugh on the other end. Unbelievable. All those years of you pretending to care about family. And now this. Pretending. The word stung more than I expected. I do care, I said, my voice tightening slightly. But caring doesn't mean I have to risk everything I've worked for. You wouldn't even be risking anything if you trusted me, he shot back. But clearly, you don't. I didn't answer right away. It wasn't about trust, not entirely. It was about patterns, about history, about the quiet understanding that things didn't always go the way Daniel believed they would. But I knew saying that out loud would only make things worse. I'm sorry, I said instead. I've made my decision. There was a long pause. Then his voice came back, colder than before. You've changed. Maybe I had. Maybe I have, I replied softly. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up. For the rest of the week, the messages kept coming. Some were subtle, filled with disappointment disguised as concern. Others were more direct, accusing me of turning my back on my own family. My mother left long voicemails, repeating the same ideas: loyalty, responsibility, sacrifice. I listened to a few of them. Then I stopped. For the first time in my life, I didn't respond to every call. I didn't explain myself over and over again. I didn't try to fix how they felt. It wasn't easy. Every ignored message made me feel a small wave of guilt, like I was doing something wrong. But with each passing day, that guilt became quieter. And something else became louder. Clarity. 2 months passed before I heard anything significant again. It came in the form of a short message from my mother. Daniel's business is struggling. Call me. I stared at the message for a long time before deciding to respond. What happened? I asked. Her reply came quickly. The loan he got had very high interest. Payments started sooner than expected. He's having trouble keeping up. I sat down slowly, reading the message again. Despite everything, I felt a twist in my chest. Not guilt, something closer to concern. Maybe even sadness. I had never wanted him to fail. That had never been the point. A few days later, I heard the full story. Daniel had managed to secure a smaller loan, around $60,000, but under terrible terms. The interest rate was high, and the repayment schedule was aggressive. He had rushed into it, confident that his business would start generating profit quickly. It didn't. Suppliers delayed shipments. Costs rose unexpectedly. The market wasn't as strong as he had believed. One problem led to another, and soon, everything started to fall apart. Within weeks, he was behind on payments. Then came the losses. He had invested his own money into the business as well, nearly $60,000 of his savings. When things began to collapse, there was no safety net left. Investors he had spoken to backed out once they saw the numbers. The warehouse lease became too expensive to maintain. And just like that, it was over. The business failed before it ever truly had a chance to stand. I received the news officially through a call from my mother. It's gone, she said, her voice tired and strained. The business, it didn't work. I closed my eyes for a moment. I'm sorry, I said quietly. There was a pause, and for a second, I thought maybe this would be a moment of understanding. A moment where everything would soften. But then she spoke again. If you had helped him, this wouldn't have happened. The words landed heavily. I opened my eyes, staring at the wall in front of me. You don't know that, I replied. Yes, I do, she insisted. He would have had better terms, more time. He could have made it work. Or maybe he would have just lost more. You chose not to help your own brother, she continued. You could have saved him, Sophia. Saved him. I let out a slow breath, feeling something shift inside me again. This time, it wasn't doubt. It was understanding. No, I said, my voice calm but firm. I didn't save him, but I didn't ruin him either. She didn't respond right away. He made his choices, I added. Just like I made mine. The silence that followed felt different from before. Not tense, not uncertain. Just quiet. After that, the messages changed. Clara sent one that read, I hope you're happy. This could have been avoided. Daniel didn't say much at first. But when he finally did, his words were sharper than anything before. This wasn't about money, he wrote. This was about you proving a point. You're vindictive, Sophia. I read the message once, then set my phone down. Maybe he believed that. Maybe they all did. But as I sat there in my quiet apartment, I realized something important. For the first time, I hadn't acted out of fear. And that made all the difference. The weeks after everything fell apart were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, not exactly, but quieter. The constant calls stopped. The long messages filled with guilt and pressure faded away. It was as if, once the outcome was clear and there was nothing left to ask from me, I became less important again. In a strange way, I didn't mind. I returned to my routines in America, but this time, they felt different. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way the sunlight stretched across my living room floor in the morning, the steady hum of life outside my window, the calm that came from knowing no one was about to demand something from me. My apartment hadn't changed, but I had. For the first time, I felt like I was actually living in my own space, not just passing through it. That didn't mean everything was easy. There were still moments when doubt crept in, usually late at night when everything was too quiet. I would think about Daniel, about the way his voice sounded during that last conversation, about the frustration and disappointment behind his words. I would think about my mother, Eleanor, and how certain she had been that I could have saved him. And sometimes, I would wonder if they were right. What if I had co-signed the loan? What if the better terms had given him more time? What if things had turned out differently? The questions came and went, but they never stayed long. Because every time I followed those thoughts a little further, I reached the same place, a place I hadn't been able to see clearly before. It wasn't my responsibility to build someone else's life for them. That realization didn't come all at once. It grew slowly, shaped by years of small moments I had ignored. I started remembering things more clearly now, without the soft filter I used to protect everyone else. I remembered the first time Daniel asked to borrow money, how easily I had agreed, how quickly that became a pattern. I remembered the casual way he dismissed paying me back, always with a joke or a promise that never quite turned into action. I remembered Clara's comments, the way she smiled while pointing out my silence as if it was something amusing. And I remembered that dinner, the table, the laughter, the word that had stayed with me longer than anything else. Doormat. For a long time, I had tried to convince myself that they didn't mean it, that it was just a joke taken too far. But now, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. They meant it. Not necessarily in a cruel way, not with the intention to hurt me deeply. But they believed it. It was how they saw me. Someone who would always agree, always help, always be there without asking for anything in return. And the truth was, I had allowed that. I had built that version of myself piece by piece. Every time I stayed silent when I wanted to speak, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I chose comfort over honesty. So when I finally changed, even in a small way, it didn't just surprise them. It threatened everything they were used to. One afternoon, my phone rang again. I looked at the screen and saw my mother's name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something told me to answer this time. Sophia, she said, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. How are you? I'm okay, I replied. How are things there? There was a pause before she answered. It's been difficult. Daniel is still dealing with everything. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understand. Another pause followed, longer this time, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "He's upset," she admitted. "He feels like you turned your back on him." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "I didn't turn my back on him," I said calmly. "I just didn't take responsibility for something that wasn't mine." "That's not how he sees it," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "But that doesn't make it true." There was no anger in my voice this time. No defensiveness. Just clarity. "I've always helped when I could," I continued. "But this wasn't just helping. This was risking everything I've built. And no one really considered what that would mean for me." She didn't interrupt. "I'm not saying I don't care about him," I added. "I do. But caring about someone doesn't mean saying yes to everything they ask for." The silence that followed felt different from all the others we had shared before. It wasn't heavy with expectation or tension. It felt thoughtful. "I suppose," she said slowly, "we didn't look at it that way." That was the closest thing to understanding I had heard from her in a long time. "I'm still the same person," I said gently. "I just don't want to be that version of myself anymore." "The doormat," she said quietly. I almost smiled, though there was still a trace of sadness in it. "Yes," I said. "That." She sighed softly, and for a moment, she sounded tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. "Change is hard," she said. "For everyone." "It is," I agreed. After we ended the call, I sat by the window, watching the evening settle over the street. The sky shifted into soft shades of gray and gold, and the world outside moved at its usual steady pace. Nothing dramatic had happened. There was no big apology, no sudden resolution where everything was fixed. Daniel was still upset. Clara probably still thought I was selfish. My mother was somewhere in between, trying to understand something she had never needed to question before. And me? I felt steady. Not perfect, not completely free from doubt, but stronger than I had been before. I realized then that standing up for myself hadn't turned me into a different person. I was still kind. I still cared. I still wanted the people I loved to succeed and be happy. But now, there was something else alongside that kindness. Boundaries. And those boundaries didn't make me cold or selfish. They made me real. I stood up from the window and looked around my apartment, the quiet, simple space that reflected the life I had built on my own. It wasn't grand or impressive, but it was mine, shaped by my choices, my effort, and my values. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain that to anyone. I didn't feel the need to justify my decisions or prove that I was a good person. I just knew. And that was enough. I'm still Sophia. I still speak softly, still think carefully, still choose my words with care. But now, when something doesn't feel right, I don't stay silent. When something asks too much of me, I don't automatically agree. Why no? And I finally do.